So the importance of teaching the Blackfoot language, it's very important now. To give you a brief history of Canada, before Canada was Canada, when the the explorers came on the Atlantic shore, they found that the land was already occupied by many First Nations. So at that time, they were making treaties with the First Nation tribes down on the eastern part of what is now Canada. When Canada became a country, when it was created, July 1st, 1867, the western part of now Canada was still occupied by many First Nations. At the time, John A. Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister, had a dream or a vision that he wanted to create a railroad right from the eastern to the western coast. But there was all these native tribes that he had to make treaties with. So when Prime Minister Macdonald was in leadership, 11 treaties were actually signed between the First Nations and the government. And I'm going to focus on Treaty 7. So Treaty 7 was signed September 22nd, 1877. At the time, the leadership, they didn't know the English language. They either put their X or touched the pen, according to our own oral research. They weren't aware of the Indian Act that was passed in 1867. 1876. They didn't know that this Indian Act was passed by the government. So this Indian Act it was going to be used to govern and manage the Indians and the lands reserved for the Indians in terms of reservations. Part of that Indian Act was in 1883. They built residential schools across Canada. Prime Minister John A. Macdonald had told his government at the time that these Indians were savages, that they needed to assimilate. And one way to do it was to take the children away from the parents. The children would be sent to these residential schools. In the residential schools, they contracted churches in Canada to run these schools. And so the focus was to assimilate them. Anything to do with the culture, the language, the culture, anything that the children, who they were, their identity was to be untaught, like to get rid of it. And so these children that went to these residential schools, they went through a lot. Many of them suffered at these residential schools. Some of the punishments for speaking a language in the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation report, and also from oral history from our own people. So they went through, for example, the withholding of food, like starvation, beatings. So the Native children went through a lot, not to speak the language. Anyways, as a result, today, I would say K-12, a lot of our Native students don't know their language, even their parents. In each community, I'm gonna, in some of the research that I've read, they're saying there might be 200 to 300 people that still speak the language fluently, which is good. So that's why it's so important today to teach the Blackfoot language. As a result of this loss of language, the Blackfoot Confederacy tribes, which are the Siksika, which is 30 miles east of Strathmore, the Gaina, which is south of Fort Macleod, the Piikani, which is east of Pincher Creek, and Amskapiikani, which are in Montana, the Blackfeet. We're separated by the border, but those are the Blackfoot Confederacy tribes. So they're really working on bringing back the language. So each tribe are doing their own plans to bring back the language. With Golden Hills, they're very supportive in bringing the Blackfoot culture and language into the schools.